custodians of the land on which I work and live, the Yagara and Turrbal people. I will acknowledge their customs, cultures, connections with country, kin and community, and I pay respects to the elders of this land, past and present. I would like to acknowledge all First Nations colleagues joining us online today. QCOS thanks First Nations peoples for the gift of the Uluru Statement from the Heart. We look forward to supporting work leading to a successful referendum to enshrine a First Nations voice to Parliament in the Australian Constitution, followed by Makarrata and Treaty. QCOS welcomes the invitation to walk with First Nations peoples in a movement for the Australian people for a better future. For those online joining us today, please feel free to acknowledge country where you are through the chat function as well. So my name is Amy Dellett. I'm the Data and Reporting Analyst in the Research and Advice team at QCOS. And a component of my role is to coordinate these Research and Evaluation Network meetings. And the other main component of my work is to develop and maintain a data management system that incorporates a range of data sources to provide meaningful analysis that supports the development of evidence-based decision-making and reports. So the terms of reference for the Research and Evaluation Network still stand, and we will again provide a copy of the terms of reference with the post-event material. And for anyone new to our network, the terms of reference gives you an overview of the purpose of the network. So for this year, we've tailored our Research and Evaluation Network activities to focus on data capacity strengthening and supports. And we've structured our activities, including the topics for these webinars, around 5 domains. So data infrastructure, data impact, data capability, data access, and data governance. The domains were selected and informed by the Swinburne University of Technology Building Data Capacity in the Not-for-Profit Sector interim report released last year. So the focus of today's webinar is around data access. So the Building Data Capacity in the Not-for-Profit Sector report defines data access as the degree of ease in capturing quality data generated from everyday transactions, sourcing publicly available data, or sharing data with collaborative partner organisations. In the same report, it gives us some suggested prompts and practical ways to think about and reflect on data access and how it relates to the organisations that we work within. So for data access, some of these prompts are: who works with data in your organisation? What kinds of data does your organisation generate? How is such data captured and in what format? What data would your organisation like to have? Does your organisation access and use external data or open data? Does your organisation share data between and within teams? And does your organisation share data with other organisations? Sorry, jumping ahead there. So in terms of the context in the community service sector around data access, community service organisations are finding access to data and information sharing a challenge, and limited access to and uneven access of data remains a barrier, particularly for small community-based organisations. Not all data are publicly available or equally accessible, and open data that is available is often not in a format that is readily usable or interoperable. Hurdles exist with sourcing community-level data and identifying relevant data sets to provide the evidence to validate and support the narrative, voices, and concerns of community around issues experienced by service users and frontline workers. When done well, community data can inform and ignite discussion around need, demand, service planning, and access to services, and explore significant issues facing the community sector, facing the community and the sector more broadly. Data intermediaries can bridge some of the data gaps community services face to enable and facilitate access to and use of consistent, up-to-date, relevant, meaningful data. We know that there is a need for access to community-level data. In Q3 this year alone, QCOS received an action data request from 12 community service organisations for support on how to access data. There's also an appetite to share data and collaborate, with many services expressing interest to participate in data sharing initiatives in the sector. Results from our QCOS data evidence and evaluation needs assessment surveys highlight that community service organisations experiencing challenges with reporting across datasets, as well as internal capability in using new technology and the manual efforts required to analyse and report on data. Data sharing, collaboration, and relationships with other organisations was noted as a key area of interest for future work for the sector. Organisations also express the desire to focus further efforts on measuring client, community, and regional needs and insights, access to services, eligibility, gaps, and unmet needs. So for organisations working in the data collaboration space, there are many complexities to this kind of work, which we undertake by balancing both the benefits of making data available and shareable with the challenges of managing the risks associated with making such data available. So benefits to accessing and sharing data may include discovering insights and further understandings around access, demand, and service delivery issues experienced by community services, identifying emerging needs and issues, opportunities to improve quality, safety, and care services, supporting and enhancing evaluation strategies, and the opportunity to more effectively direct funding and effort. Access to data can empower communities, strengthen capacity, inform evidence-based program design and evaluation, guide policy change, and demonstrate improved outcomes. Benefits may also include fostering transparent, accountable, efficient, responsive, and effective agencies and governments. And lastly, data access and collaboration can provide opportunities for innovation, the potential to measure collective impact and outcomes across sectors. Some of the challenges and barriers to enabling data access and collaboration, some of them I've already touched on, but these are around barriers to access data in the first place, also a potential reluctance to share data, and risks and perceived risks of digital security and privacy breaches, considerations around intellectual property rights, and additional barriers around interoperability and coherence across sectors and jurisdictions. There can also be a perceived lack of trust in the data and poor data quality and analysis capability. Challenges can be present in addressing and maintaining obligations around data confidentiality, and not having procedures in place for statistical disclosure control. Finally, data practices and regulation are dynamic and rapidly changing, and this can present an ongoing challenge for organisations to stay up to date. So thinking about data access and sharing from a global perspective, I wanted to highlight the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, the recommendation on enhancing access to and sharing of data. The recommendation was adopted in October 2021, and it's the first internationally agreed on set of principles and policy guidance on how governments can maximise cross-sectoral benefits of all types of data. The recommendation sets out general principles and policy guidance on how governments can maximise the benefits of enhancing data access and sharing arrangements while protecting individuals and organisations' rights and taking into account other legitimate interests and objectives. Another global perspective around data access and sharing are the International Open Data Charter Principles. So the ODC principles were developed in 2015, and there are 6 of them. The principles are open by default, timely and comprehensive, accessible and usable, comparable and interoperable, for improved governance and citizen engagement, and for inclusive development and innovation. If we think about access to data in the Australian context, the Australian Data Strategy sets out the vision of how to support Australia's continuing transition to a data-driven economy, with mature capabilities to use, reuse, and share data in effective, safe, and secure ways. It recognises data access and data use as an important driver of economic growth and job creation, improved service delivery, agility and resilience, and better outcomes for all. Another consideration of open data is the FAIR and CARE principles. So in 2016, the FAIR guiding principles for scientific data management and stewardship were published in the journal Scientific Data. The authors intended to provide guidelines to improve the findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reuse of digital assets. This is a brief summary of the FAIR principles. So findable, that is, the first step in reusing data is to find them. Metadata and data should be easy to find for both humans and computers. Machine-readable metadata are essential for automatic discovery of datasets and services. They need to be accessible. So once the user finds the required data, they need to know how they can be accessed, possibly including authentication and authorization. Interoperable. The data usually need to be integrated with other data. In addition, the data need to interoperate with applications or workflows for analysis, storage, and processing. And reusable. The ultimate goal of FAIR is to optimize the reuse of data. To achieve this, metadata and data should be well described so that they can be replicated or combined in different settings. There's been some criticism of the FAIR principles that the focus on data sharing among entities ignores power differentials and historical contexts. So outcomes from a workshop on international law, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People and Data and Indigenous Data Sovereignty, which was held in July 2019, included the formation of GIDA, the Global Indigenous Data Alliance, and endorsement and hosting of the CARE principles for Indigenous data governance. So GIDA emphasised that the focus on data sharing alone creates a tension for Indigenous peoples who are also asserting greater control over the application and use of Indigenous data and Indigenous knowledge for collective benefit. So elements around the CARE principles include collective benefit, that data ecosystems should be designed and function in ways that enable Indigenous peoples to derive benefit from the data. Authority to control, so Indigenous peoples' rights and interests in Indigenous data must be recognised and their authority to control such data empowered. Responsibility, those working with Indigenous data have a responsibility to share how those data are used to support Indigenous people's self-determination and collective benefit. Accountability requires meaningful and openly available evidence of these efforts and the benefits accruing to Indigenous peoples. And finally, ethics. Indigenous people's rights and wellbeing should be the primary concern at all stages of the data lifecycle and across the data ecosystem. So the principles complement the existing FAIR principles, encouraging open and other data movements to consider both people and purpose in their advocacy and pursuits. In Queensland, the Queensland government has an open data policy statement, which outlines its commitment to releasing data and allowing it to be freely used, reused, and redistributed by anyone, anywhere, and anytime. The policy statement commits to the 6 principles from the International Open Data Charter, which we've already just discussed. And on this link, which I've shared the link, the Queensland Government agencies' open data strategies are made available. Queensland government agencies also have a specific obligation to publish open data, and these are some of the examples of the obligations of the Department and Premier and Cabinet. Datasets are also made available on the Queensland Government Open Data Portal and are automatically assessed and given a data usability rating. So the data usability rating gives users an indication of the data's accessibility, openness, and structural and content consistency. Each dataset is assessed with a rating between 0 and 5, assigned based on the tick rating criteria. In general, a high rating dataset of 4 or 5 ticks indicate greater readiness for data analysis, and a low rating dataset may require, in some instances, data handling or other action to fully realise its value. So rather than just talking about data access, I thought I'd also like to showcase an example of the work that QCOS is doing around improving access to data through data visualization of open and publicly available data sets that exist. So this dashboard includes data on the Queensland Social Housing Register, and you can explore the time series data by clicking through the pages, filters, and charts to review summary information for all of Queenslanders, First Nations communities, housing service centre regions, local government authority areas, and state electorates. So as of this week, anyone can access these dashboards from our website or through the link provided in these slides. It's the first data set that we have published online using the software Power BI and the expertise of our members and partners team. So up till this point, dashboards have been shared internally within our team at QCOS, with the intention of getting to this point where we can now start to share some of this work with the wider community services sector, our members and partners. So just to note that the dashboards on the website are unable to be viewed from a mobile phone layout, and we do recommend viewing them from a desktop computer. We have a number of data sets that we collate and analyse at QCOS, which some of our members might be aware of through our engagement in community town halls, which we've had over the last 2 years. And next year, we'd really like to extend on some of this data visualization work by making more of the data sets we're collating available to the sector to access and use. So for anyone who is interested in this work, please feel free to get in touch with myself or our team at research@qcos.org.au. And there are many other open data sources that we can draw on to inform the work we do in the community services sector. So I thought I'd share some of the resources I know of to support the network to be able to identify, locate, and access some of the open data that is available. Because of time limitations, I can't explore all of these links with you today, but definitely please feel free to take some time to review these resources and links when we send out copies of the presentation. So some of these links are community profiling tools, some of them are around data visualizations, and others are links to the raw data, which we would then need to analyze and potentially visualize as well. So again, this isn't a comprehensive list. It's just there are a lot of other open data sets available, but it's a guide if you're unsure where to start, where to look, and where to find open data. So this first table, it has links to different data sets to explore and includes data sets released by the Australian Government, Queensland Government, the Queensland Treasury, the ABS and Torrens University Australia. This next slide has links to different data sets specific to various service delivery areas. So for example, child protection, youth justice, culturally and linguistically diverse communities, aged care data, regional insights for Indigenous communities, workplace gender equality data, labour market and jobs insights, poverty and inequality in Australia, and the Department of Social Services data. There's also links to resources related to health data sets, the State Penalties and Enforcement Registry, or SPER, the Australian Early Developmental Census data, settlement reports, a range of different housing data sets, and the Australian Leadership Index. So this leads us into our guest speaker component of our discussion today. So I'd like to welcome our first guest speaker, Christy Mansfield, CEO and co-founder of SEER Data and Analytics. Christy is an inspirational thought leader, published author, and industry leader on the use of data for social benefit. Christy has served on several boards, including the North Queensland Cowboys Community Foundation, the Stella Prize, the Australian Women Donors Network, Sharing Stories, and the New South Wales Government's Family and Community Services Advisory Board for Social Investment. In 2015, she was named one of Australia's 100 Women of Influence by the Australian Financial Review. Christy is a respected social innovator and thought leader on the future of data for good, customer experience, big data, and predictive analytics. Christy's data and technology background in corporates and startups is combined with a long track record in the philanthropic sector as the former executive director of the Sydney Community Foundation and Sydney Women's Fund, and founder of social and impact investment advisory firm Greenstone Group. With the SEER data platform, Christy is solving the problem she had leading not-for-profits. So I'll now hand over to Christy, and then we'll do an introduction for Lorna, and then we'll have an opportunity for Q&A for both Christy and Lorna at the end of the presentations. But please feel free to add any questions you have in the comments box as we go, and we'll get to them at the Q&A time. So thanks, Christy. I'll just stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the thorough and kind introduction. I'm just going to share my screen and bring up the presentation that I wanted to go through today and acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I'm coming to you from today. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and wanted to recognise all the great, incredible data leaders that we're working with across many First Nations communities in Australia. So it's wonderful to be here and talk with you a little bit more about where we're up to in making data more accessible to the not-for-profit sector and social services sector. I guess we've really come from a paradigm where data, it's very difficult to share data because of a paradigm of not being allowed, not able, or not willing. And many of us who've tried to access data, particularly data that sits within governments or within our own organisations, for example, have often come up against the challenges of not allowed, not able, not willing. What is really exciting about this moment in time is that's kind of disappeared, and there is an authorising environment in many, many contexts, federally and also in the states around Australia. We are at different levels in different jurisdictions, but we're moving into allowed and willingness. Now we need to think about how to do it safely. And I think, Amy, you spoke about some of this earlier, data collaboration being really key, and how to manage privacy for all of protection and privacy, yet making that data more accessible so that we collectively can do our work for public benefit, and really recognising data as an asset. So we're excited to be working on this problem, and we do get to work with Lorna and her incredible team and the community in Gladstone, and I'm excited to hear the story more, Lorna, in a moment. I guess the problem we're aiming to overcome is this challenge of access and sharing, because data, as we know, can be incredibly overwhelming, confusing and disconnected. Yet we know it also has this massive potential for us to make better decisions, to figure out what's needed on the ground, oftentimes reinforcing what we already know, but giving us an evidence base to then tell a story and to describe how policy or how funding is being delivered on the ground. And it also helps us to actually challenge traditional belief systems or traditional ways of doing work to figure out what's working or what's not. And we know that data sits within all our organisations, and if we could pull that data and use that data combined with data that governments might hold that are not publicly available and public data, then there would be massive public benefit for us in all of our work. Yet one of the challenges, of course, is not all of us are analysts. So how do we overcome this and be able to use data in a really constructive way that drives forward better conversations and better decisions? Just very quickly, Amy did speak about the Australian data strategy, and I suppose that this really talks to the allowed part, the authorising environment that's really shifted in Australia in the last few years. So as we know, there's a very big focus on data access and data sharing. It's been recognised that data is a huge asset that impacts our society, it impacts our economy. It also is invested in across this entire public service. So there's a massive investment in the Australian public service in all jurisdictions becoming data literate, data capable, and there's a very large effort across many agencies all over Australia, federal and state and local, to catalogue data assets, to steward those data assets and make those data assets available for sharing in the first instance between government agencies, but also to communities. And so this is a really exciting move. It started in different jurisdictions, and I'm going to talk about what's happening in Tasmania right now. But we do think that government to community or government to not-for-profit sharing is going to be the norm. And that's not very far away, considering where we have been previously. So, of course, we know there's the Data Availability and Transparency Act, and the scheme makes it not only possible, but legislates data sharing between universities and data holders, and also government data holders. Where there are data sharing agreements occurring between not-for-profits, between government agencies and not-for-profits, that's happening outside predominantly the scheme. But we also see real willingness and interest in in pilots for sharing to not-for-profits, so that in the review of the legislation, not-for-profits will be part of the scheme moving forward. And that review is underway is scheduled in 2 years' time. So in the next 2 years, we really strongly anticipate that not-for-profits will formally be able to participate in this scheme. Yet, as I said, much of what's happening in terms of sharing at the moment is happening outside of this, and data sharing agreements are well and truly underway between government agencies and not-for-profits and local communities. And then there's just so many other things happening, large commitments to open data and publishing, aggregate data available at a more local level so that that can be really useful to interrogate that data and ask questions of it. There's the Closing the Gap Reform 4, of course, which is a commitment to sharing data at a regional level. And I think Amy touched on that briefly. There's also the ability to search government data assets through a massive cataloguing activity that's going on, which is really significant because for us in the not-for-profit sector, it was difficult for us to figure out where the data sits and what data is available that can be useful, where we can enrich our data and service delivery data with that data. So a very exciting number of activities and investments in data access and sharing in the across Australia at the moment. What does that really mean for us as on the ground, and what does that mean for us in our day-to-day work? So, of course, it's important to think about structurally the power imbalances that exist and how data can address some of those imbalances. And we're starting to see that in places around Australia where collective impact work and service provision work is really being driven from the ground up, from the grassroots up. Of course, we know that, and Lorna is, and Gladstone is part of the Stronger Places, Stronger People program, which is a collective impact initiative. We're working very closely with the Connected Beginnings sites, which is also a grassroots-led community development work to make sure data is available and shareable to support that work. Yet it's happening in many places around Australia, and it's an exciting movement to see. And as I mentioned earlier, very excited to share with you that the Tasmanian government on Tuesday is launching its data sharing. 15 different data assets that haven't been shared previously with communities are being shared with the community of Burnie and then more broadly across the community over time. So this is a really big move and is an indication that there's acknowledgement that when we do share with not-for-profits and community-led initiatives, that people can make better decisions on the ground to get better outcomes. And that's incredibly useful and exciting. For those of you who don't know about the work that's happening in Bourke, this is the largest data sharing initiative in Australia at the grassroots. It's the Maranoka work. It's a place-based initiative, also part of Stronger Places, Stronger People. And 10 years ago, essentially, what the community did was come together to implement the first and trial the first justice reinvestment project in Australia. That was 10 years ago. Data access was core to that work. And today, through the SEER platform, we're not only making publicly available data accessible to the community of Bourke, but also sharing data assets from federal government agencies, including DSS, and also New South Wales government data assets together with the not-for-profits and service providers who are doing the work there in Bourke on the ground. And that data asset is held by and managed by the Bourke, the Maranoka Initiative, governed by the Bourke Tribal Council. So it's the first example of, I suppose, scaling up First Nations data sovereignty and operationalising that in Australia. There are many other examples around Australia. It is looking different in many places, and Amy spoke a little bit about the fair and care principles earlier, how this plays out to really make sure that data is accessible for First Nations decision making and those partners that are working with communities on the ground is really exciting to see that happening. So really, I think where we're going with data access, data that is accessible to you all at your desk. And what that means is open data, data that your organisation might hold, or data that has been shared with you from custodians such as government agencies or even philanthropic or businesses. So when data is available to you and it's easy to work with, we're starting to see better collaboration, decision making through collaboration, the ability to take action on the data in the moment, but also quarterly or over time to evaluate what's working and what's not for that shared learning and continuous learning. To tell stories in a very creative way by not only sense making, but also bringing in local stories and qualitative stories alongside the numbers, having ownership of that data through sovereignty and the importance of sovereignty, having the ability to query that data and use that data at your fingertips so you don't have to constantly be prepping that data and working with it, especially as Amy already said, when data is publicly available, often it's very hard to work with and standards are often changing with releases of new data sets through the ABS or otherwise. And then really thinking about how you govern that data and see data as a resource that sits within your organisation as a product. And as government agencies and businesses more and more curate what we call domain data products and make those more accessible to you, then similarly, you will start to see, of course, as you build out your own data products, how important and how valuable that is for that decision-making process. The thing that I'm very excited about is that I see that it gives people more power, more confidence, and more efficiency, essentially, in all of the decisions that they're making. And more power because it means that you can have that conversation, challenge potentially what policy makers might be making decisions on. If you have access to that data, then you're actually able to do that work yourself and have those very equal and important conversations. So very quickly, we're a data platform that enables, we're trying to solve this problem. And we are very excited to be cataloguing data, sharing data, making data accessible, helping communities bring in their own data and tell stories with it. That's all I really had for you today. I guess the main message for me is to you is that I do think it's time that the data reins are being loosened for all of us to benefit from these assets, to think about open data, what those gaps might be, what data you hold within your organisation and how to think about it as an asset. And in Queensland, you know, if there's a willingness and an openness for data sharing to engage in that conversation and to move forward with, you know, how that can be useful for all the decisions that you're making in your organisations. So thank you very much for your time, and back to you, Amy.
Thank you so much, Christy. That was, yeah, it was just so yeah, I could listen to you all day, I think. I'd now like to introduce our next guest speaker, Lorna McGuinness, Executive Director of Gladstone Region Engaging in Action Together. So with connections to Central Queensland, Northern Territory, Asia, Africa, the Americas, and Europe, Lorna chose the Gladstone region in 2005 as the right place to raise her children. Lorna feels extremely privileged to support this work for community in a role she has always wanted that never existed. Leveraging her community development, social impact management, project management, and business improvement experience, Lorna's aspiration is to enable the Gladstone community to achieve more with what they have and create amazing futures for our children. So welcome, Lorna. Thank you so much for joining us today. feel free to share your screen if you'd like to share your slides.
Thanks so much, Amy and Christy. Pleasure to be following on from Christy with her experience in this area. And thanks so much, Amy, for setting that lovely context as well. Amy and Christy have spoken to the appetite at the moment for data sharing across a whole range of stakeholders, and particularly in terms of being able to access data from government agencies that we haven't previously been able to access. So in terms of working in place-based work, it's an extremely exciting time to be doing this. So it's my pleasure to be here today to talk to you about Gladstone Region Engaging in Action Together, or GRT for short. It's a bit of a mouthful. We do that just so that when we're being introduced, we really put our MCs on the spot. So well done, Amy. We would just like to use this opportunity, I guess, to follow on from Christy and Amy to give some context in a locally place-based initiative in terms of the why this is so important, but also in terms of the how we're doing this on the ground. So thanks so much. I'd like to also pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to acknowledge the fact that we are on the lands of the Baili, Gureng, Goreng and Turrbulung Bunda people in the beautiful Gladstone region. We're located in central Queensland, and if you haven't been to visit before, I strongly recommend it. A great spot on the bottom of the Southern Barrier Reef. So here in our community, we have a strong identity as a community, but we're quite recognised not only across Queensland and nationally, but also internationally as being what we would call the engine room or the economic powerhouse of Queensland. So we've got a large industrial base here. We've got the big players, the big global players like Rio Tinto, ConocoPhillips, Santos, Shell. A lot of our community base their careers and lifestyles around their economic, the fact that there's economic opportunity here in terms of building careers in that industry environment. Unfortunately though, while we'd consider ourselves a very wealthy town and upbeat, often referring to ourselves as Happy Rock or Glad Vegas and Gladstonites, that opportunity and wealth doesn't always extend to everyone in our community. So what we see is a little bit of disparity between those that have and those that don't, which doesn't sit very well with our community vision, values and aspirations, which is really about opportunity, equity and quality of life for everyone in our community. We really want to see that wealth shared and to create the opportunities for our children, for their generation, but also for future generations. So that's something in Gladstone that we really hold as a high importance. And it's really been the driver behind Gladstone accepting the offer from government to be part of the Stronger Places, Stronger People initiative. So as Christy mentioned earlier, under the Stronger Places, Stronger People initiative, we work to a collective impact model. So some key sort of elements in terms of how that collective impact model controls the work that we do locally. Given that we're community-led and place-based, three of the key elements are a shared community vision, a shared action plan with clear goals and schedules, and then of course data and measurement is a key element of the work as well. And those three elements are underpinned by strong trust and communication across all stakeholders involved by being impacted, participating in, or being impacted by some of the government elements, industry, economic elements in our community. The fifth element, of course, is a backbone team, so having the resources to be able to do the work and to be able to facilitate the conversations and bring the conversations together. So just in front of you on the screen there, you'll see there's a bit of a insight into how we do that work on the ground. We work closely with our identified stakeholders across sector, and that's all sectors, so cross sector, whether it be education, health, human service sector, and work really closely with our community, including grassroots community. So we have a constant community engagement program. We're out and about talking to families that may be living in caravan parks if they've been pushed out of the rental market. We're in men's shelters, outside shopping centres, you name it. You'll find us most days of the week out and about talking to community and ensuring that community interest in how we improve wellbeing in our community really helps to direct the work. So recognizing, like Christy said, that real quantitative and qualitative aspect of the work. The stories are as important to us as the statistics are. So being community-led, the community have identified our key areas of priority. We're a funded program under Strong Places, Strong People at the moment to the end of June 2024. So we've got this small window to be able to make some really important early changes in the way that we go about things in Gladstone. And our community members have assisted us to really narrow in on what it is that we're going to focus on over the next couple of years. So in terms of that shared agenda, we've got a theory of change that identifies those priority areas and an action plan that actually goes into the detail then of how we're going to go about doing that. So that's the starting point of where community have used data, both again, qualitative and quantitative, to measure and identify what the trends have been, where we're at, what needs improving, and to be able to look at how we're going to improve that. So using data as well for design of some of those solutions and implementation plans. So that brings us to why the Gladstone Region Wellbeing Data Hub is so important in the work that we're doing. Christy spoke about sovereignty, data sovereignty, for our First Nations people particularly, but across all of our community members, recognising that often the data that is captured, whether it be held by government or held at a community level, belongs to those people that the data is about. So we recognise the Gladstone Region Wellbeing Data Hub as being our community-owned asset, our community-owned database of Gladstone Region data that belongs to Gladstone Region community members. We work very closely with Sphere Data and Analytics, and they have assisted us to build our own capacity and to understand how we fit in the context of other data work that's happening across Queensland and across Australia. And then the data that we have been looking at so far really helps to understand not only the issues, but how we can measure change as we go forward in working together to see how successful we can be. The data hub itself is managed by the Gladstone or GRT backbone team. And we've got key partners in the works. Under Stronger Places, Stronger People, our partners are 3 levels of government, Commonwealth level government, Queensland government, and our local council, Gladstone Regional Council. And Rio Tinto has also partnered with us in this work as a key partner to fund the Gladstone Data Hub. And this data is important to them as well as a key industry player and being able to ensure that their social investments are also targeted and aligned to community priorities and need areas. So a bit of a busy slide here in front of you, but just wanted to recognise and acknowledge the different data sources. So at a population level, we obviously access a lot of those open sources that Amy has generously provided the list of access points for in terms of government held data predominantly, which might be collected through census data or might be collected through service provision. I'm sure many of you are familiar with platforms like P2I and DEX. Through our government partners, we're having conversations at the moment about how we might be able to share some of that data. Again, as Christy mentioned, in a safe way, so ensuring that that privacy of our community members is secured at all times, but being able to look at how we might be able to de-identify that data to make it usable and really valuable to our community members and our services. To inform the work that they're doing and the design of the services that they're providing to community. In addition to the government held data, we recognise that our providers also capture data or could capture data as well that is beyond what's provided to government in presentation and referral data, or what might already be presented to government in terms of participant outcomes. So that might be in the form, for example, where we recognise a data gap, where we go out and actually develop a tailor-made community strategy and run that strategy in community to survey community members to understand how they see and how they self-assess their own well-being. Some countries already do this. This is done quite well in New Zealand, but we're looking at how we might be able to do that locally on the ground as well, is to be able to have that community self-assessment, individual self-assessment of quality of life as they experience it in the Gladstone region. And then of course the case studies. So the beauty of the Sphere platform is that we can have those stories and statistics side by side. So we can actually have the community members tell their own stories alongside the data, being able to then further deepen our understanding of the data, the statistics, but also being able to explain what it's like to be one of those numbers on the ground and actually living that in our local community. And of course, the data then is really the key purpose of the data then is about that local analysis and planning so that we can make informed decisions. So I just wanted to share with you some of the learnings that we've had, because we've had a 2-year journey now in trying to understand some of the data for our community. And if you are interested in using Gladstone as a bit of an example about what that looks like, some of our very early work a couple of years ago, our Gladstone region journey story, which is the stories, in the words of our own community members, how they've experienced life here, and how some of the boom and bust aspects of our industrial growth has impacted their quality of life in Gladstone. Some of those stories are available in the Gladstone journey story. And then there's also our baseline report that was brought together in 2021, which has given us our baseline data for measurement going forward. But one of the things we found right from the very start, the first thing is there's way too many rabbit holes. So if you are early on your journey of data exploration, just pre-warning there that it's very easy to disappear down a rabbit hole. So we've tried to, I guess, construct a anchoring point for ourselves around how do we stay on track. And these are key questions that we use all the time. So firstly, looking at whether the data is fit for purpose. So what is the question that we're trying to answer? And of course, looking at causal factors in all the issues and pressures that we're seeing in our community. We often refer back to the problem-solving technique of the 5 whys. So then you have young children, you'll be used to that. Why, but why, but why, but why, but why? So trying to get back to that causal understanding of what's going on for our community. And then, of course, what are we trying to monitor and measure? So we might have our baseline data, but what is it that is going to tell us over time that we're headed in the right direction, or that if there has been a change, that change has occurred, so that we can actually monitor and measure where we're at. And then being very purposeful and intentional about the data that we're collecting. So what are we going to do with the data, and what outcomes will it help us to create? One of the questions that I find really useful here is to ask, without this data, we will find it hard to something. So without this data, we will find it hard to understand what's happening for our community, or to quantify what needs to be addressed, or to evidence the need that we have in our community in order to provide the right resources. So what we do with the data, what outcomes will help us create. And then, of course, because there is such an appetite at the moment around data, we're really conscious that those that are working in the data space, particularly data analysts within government, are really, really busy. So one of the things that we are trying to do with a lot of our data partners across Queensland and wider at the moment is to look at who else might be in need of this data or requesting similar data. How can we partner to reduce the load on the data holders, which of course will then help in the efficiency and provision of that data? And is there a way that we can increase our understanding of some of our local issues, even though we are place-based, by then sharing data and working with some of those other partners to look at what our understanding is collectively of issues across different areas? So that's just a few of our key learnings. I could probably spend 2 or 3 hours telling you about some of those. We've learned the hard way in some cases, but we've also had some great mentors and supporters who have given us very clear learnings out of their own work so that we can understand where to best spend our time. So 2 really important divisions of data for us. One is about the outcomes for individuals, and that's looking at sort of looking, if you like, at the who, what, when, where, why, how. So in terms of outcomes for individuals and improving well-being, we're looking at what's happening in our community, who's being impacted, so what demographic and cohorts are we talking about, where is this occurring, why is it occurring, so again back to those causal factors, and when. And then secondary to that, looking at, well, what's already in place, so how do we make sure that our services that are already available are well integrated and are achieving the best they can with what they've got. So looking at how can we make a continuous improvement approach to our existing service delivery? How can we optimize all of our operations across our service sector? How can we work together better in that space? How can we predict what might happen in the future? So looking at future trends, and then really be able to set together that clear direction. And we think that is the key to the informed decision-making, being able to make really well-controlled and measured plans and actions, being agile and responsive, and then again, being very intentional and proactive. So just to give you a small insight into how we're using our data hub, because the next couple of slides I'm just going to talk through are about our data hub specifically and about our public access to data. But there's two other elements to the data use that we have. One is the closed data that might be available in the SEER platform, in the data hub, but on a login access only. And that might be, for example, for our working groups that are dealing with more sensitive data. And then the third is really sensitive data that we might not even be able to share with a wider group of people like our working groups. And that's, for example, some of our child safety data. We had a little bit of a dilemma over, well, how do we use data that is so sensitive that it can't be shared? But basically, by having the data, it can help us still to inform where we need to focus in our community in terms of location, who those people are, and what is it that we need to provide, without actually feeling the need to feel constrained by the fact that it is such sensitive data with such high privacy. So just before we close out, and I will provide access to the data hub for you as well, so you know where to find it if you'd like to go for a bit of an explore. This is just a snapshot of our dashboards. So we've themed our dashboards across the key areas that our community are working on and those priorities that they identified through the work. In the data hub, there's the capacity to be able to look at suburbs. So while we do most of our comparison of Gladstone against Queensland, you'll also see that in here, we've actually used the Clinton New Auckland suburb as a comparison point. So community members, for example, in the Agnes Water region can have a look specifically at the data for their community. It is community-led, so really important then that we look to that lived experience, and the lived experience informs the commentary that you see across the dashboards, and we're constantly looking for feedback. So there is an opportunity as well to offer feedback on what data might be useful to add to the hub so that we've got that depth of data. And in addition to keeping the data as simple as we can and being very specific about what data we've included in those dashboards, we've also got the opportunity for people to find more data on that topic in the deep dive section. So just to close out, the Gladstone Region Wellbeing Data Hub is available on our website. On the left-hand side there, you'll see that there is a link on our front page, but I would encourage you to go into the Data Hub tab on our website, which will also give you access to the Data Hub guide, which will help you navigate through the data. And again, we really encourage you to offer feedback. So even if you're not living in our community, we'd love to hear feedback, because we're looking to improve this as a key asset for our community to use and inform our wellbeing improvement going forward. So thank you so much for your time and patience in listening to our story in Gladstone, our journey, and I hope that's been helpful for you.
Amy, you're just on mute.
Sorry, everyone, I was on mute. Technology. Yeah, I just wanted to say congratulations to you both, Lorna and Christy. The Gladstone Data Hub is really impressive. So I'd like to open it up. I'll share my screen again, just so we can follow on with the slides. But yeah, basically just wanted to open up to our guests online to send through any questions. We've got a thank you already from Katie Williams. And yeah, I mean, I had some questions as well, but I'd really love to hear if there's any questions from our participants. Just you can pop them in the chat there. Lorna, you kind of already answered a lot of my questions, which were around, like the gaps in the data. And, I was really interested to hear, I think, there's so much alignment with our vision at QCOS of equality, opportunity and wellbeing. So there's so many opportunities, to partner further and to explore. So I'll just see if there's any other questions or comments. Doesn't look like there's anything coming through at the moment. Lots. Oh, okay. Yeah. So Katie was saying that she has lots of questions, but she might follow up with you offline, Lorna, directly. So yeah, more than happy to make those connections if you need contact details for anyone. And definitely we'll be circulating, the slides from today's presentations as well as the recordings as soon as possible. I think I was having a bit of a reflection moment where, I think I had a conversation with you, Lorna, the other day around, kind of saying, what if community organizations, don't have these resources around data systems or data collaboration and that kind of capability. And, I think it was a really good reminder. And I remember a mentor of mine when I was working in the Aboriginal community controlled health space, they said the same thing, when you're doing work around data collaboratives, you start somewhere, anywhere you can start, forming those partnerships and looking through the data and working out what it all means is just so valuable. So yeah, I think you've got so many more insights to share. Did you have any reflections, Lorna, on, the work to date, or, what are the next steps?
Yeah, thanks, Amy. I know this sounds really simple, but the thing that we found was, again, predominantly because of the rabbit holes, there's so much data out there. And when you first start out, it feels as though you have to explore data first to find out what the questions are. And it is a bit of a chicken and egg. It is a cyclic process. For every data set you get, there's more questions that it raises. And each time it does get you closer to what that causal factor is or what the real understanding of the issue is. But I think if you're unsure, or if you don't have a lot of time and resources, or if you don't feel confident with data, the first thing is just listing the questions. If you know what the questions are, that's the real gold. If you can list the questions, often there are people that can provide some resources to give you some help around answering those questions. But it's the key. I'd be interested if Christy's got some other ideas there as well. We've had a few conversations like this, Christy.
Oh, I think that's so true. Understanding what question you have, and telling the story in a way that works for your community, for your organisation. I think that is an area, data storytelling, that is going to become incredibly important, because obviously this conversation is about access to data. How do you work with the data that you might need, where publicly available data might be difficult to work with, and then how do you share data, how do you collaborate with data? And then once you have those assets available and your questions, as Lorna said, then it's really about your story, how you want to tell that story in a way that connects with the people that you're serving, your different stakeholders, and taking people on that journey and crafting stories that really make sense for the decisions that you want to make.
I think it is a really specific skill too. That data story component is quite different to, pulling together data and analyzing it. And I think it's definitely, I've identified it as a room for improvement for me. But I think it would be really great to have, a topic for our research and evaluation network next year, on some really great data storytellers, and, how do we do that? So yeah, lots of ideas for next year. What are plans for SIA, in the future, Christy? Like, where do you see your organization going?
Yeah. Our vision is really to make data accessible, shareable, usable, so people can tell stories with it and own that asset, as a community asset. So we want to bring, this is the new term that I keep hearing in governments, but anyway, we want to bring data to the desk for everybody. So make it, democratize that access, but make it easy for people to work with it, because we don't have a lot of time. We know how important it is as a useful tool for making decisions. We know how important it is for having conversations with policymakers, and also just to challenge myths, to do our work, to have it available. Yet it can be very complex, as I said, and as we've spoken about. So making it easier, that's our vision, to make it as easy as possible so that all people can feel really confident working with data and telling the stories that matter to them.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's just, yeah, it's so exciting, such interesting work. Maybe I'm a little bit biased.
Yeah.
To me, it's interesting, exciting. Yeah, so yeah, there's been no other comments. Did anyone have any final, you know, sentiment that they wanted to kind of share? We do have a bit of time, but I am aware, Christy, that you need to head off, you know, back to your conference in a few minutes. I've got a couple of more things to go through from my slides, but yeah, did you have any final comments that you would like to make, either of you?
Just very happy if there are other communities that are thinking about this work, or if you already started the work and could share something with us. Always happy to hear from people, but certainly if there's anything that resonated in the journey that I've just outlined, as I say, we were so lucky to be able to be mentored by a range of other Stronger Places, Stronger People communities that gave us their learning. So I'm very happy to pay that forward and share any of our experiences with anyone that might be interested.
Yeah, and Amy, we're running all the time free data visualizations or storytelling, etc. If people are interested, and actually it's free to access the platform to use open data. If people want to get going with something, jump in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I had some fun playing around with the data portal the last couple of months too. And so I've shared some of those links already in the chat function, and that will also be available in our post-webinar email as well. We've also recently just started trialing a forum, a research and evaluation forum, where we can just more informally connect with our members and the research and evaluation network. So, you know, if there is any events that you have come up, I'm more than happy to share those with our members. You know, just, yeah, I think the more opportunities to engage in this work, the better. And, you know, over time, that really builds our capacity and capability, you know, to do some of this work. So thank you very much. So yeah, I guess drawing on your expertise and experience working with communities and advocating for and enabling data access and collaboration, building community data capability, and the journey you've both been on to support place-based, community-led and driven work is so important. And thank you both so much for sharing all your insights with us today. We really appreciate your time and enthusiasm to share with the network, and we really look forward to collaborating with you further into the future. If you need to, you can feel free to jump off. I'm just going to go through a couple more slides, and then yeah, we'll close out a little bit early today, which is exciting. You know, get some time back in your day. So this is a summary of all of the open data resources. Am I sharing my screen? I think so. Yes. Yeah, so the summary of all of the open resources that I've shared today, as well as a couple of additional links there around, you know, an Australian Government Open Data Toolkit and the Open Data Institute, which is also a really great resource as well. And then also I thought I would add in here some additional resources and reading materials around data projects, learnings, and examples of data collaboration and community data-driven projects that are happening within the community services sector here and abroad. And finally, we do have some polling options for everyone. So, you know, which is, yeah, receiving feedback from you all about how we went with today's session. So I'll just try and get those polls up on our screen, if you can see in there. So first question, how satisfied were you with this webinar today, with 5 as the highest score? If anyone who's still left online, if you can please give some feedback on how we went today, that would be really amazing. Thank you. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes to answer those questions. And then the next question is, did the content of the webinar provide you with some ideas and information on how you could use open data sources to measure outcomes and inform the work that you do? So we'll just give you a few more minutes to answer those. And finally, I just wanted to flag with you all, we have a save the date for our final Research and Evaluation Network webinar for 2022. It's on Tuesday the 13th, so a bit less than a month away. The topic is around data governance in the community services sector. So we'll include discussing concepts, including the 5 SAFEs framework. And we're going to hear from guest speakers from the community services sector on how they navigate issues around client consent, privacy, confidentiality, data sharing agreements, and governance of data projects. We've got really exciting guest speakers for that event. We've got Samantha Cooper from the Community Legal Centres Queensland, and also Cleo Gardner and Luke Coffey from Queensland Positive People. So we might end the webinar there. Thank you again, everyone. Feel free to get in touch, and we hope you enjoyed today's. See you next time. Have a nice day.